Is the panel accessible?
I think it'd be silly to just turn things on or off.
Well, let me show you where he was in. The camera. We need somebody to.
Are you gonna sit here at the door? There.
Fuck.
Good. Just remember how to take a picture. Take a picture of the panel, that way you can well, you're gonna take a picture of the panel and then when you're done with it, send it to me. No. We can partial your military. Yeah. Yeah. Saturday, huh?
Okay, it's standing all right. Thanks for your help, folks. Sure. I'm going to take a walk. I see you later.
All right, bear with me while I'm trying to get, I can't get the YouTube stream up and running, but I've got the recording. So tonight we're going to have Adam Engst from Tidbits. And looks like we picked a good night to Skype him with the snow. He's going to be talking about the new OS and the new hardware. So we'll save our news until a little bit later. He's got a first article on the Tidbits websites is blackmail spam is on the rise. We don't want to do that. All right. Anyone know any tricks about why YouTube wouldn't work with all the same properties we do every month?
Call YouTube tech support.
Yeah, that would work. No, I can get to YouTube on the website. I just can't get the streamer open. I've got the right encoder. I've got the right key. Everything worked last month. I can't use webcam. Yeah, because I'm using a different streaming program. And I also need to change the video settings for Skype. So we'll let Adam see the audience. Okay, and audio is going to be the iMic. All right, I hit the test button, does that mean it should be making a noise? Channel 4 and 5 should be making noises. Okay, built-in output should now be going into the PA. Test, test, test.
Hello, welcome to Skype call testing service. After the beep, please record a message. Afterwards, your message will be played back to you.
As my audio is not muted. As audio input should be the iMic, okay. Test, test, test. We'll turn that down a little. Output should be headphone. Test, test, test. Let me try a different audio. Hang on just a second. Might as well play. Alright, so we're getting nothing. So headphones out. Alright, so we're getting audio out from the computer, but it was not going in to the PA. I've got volume on the PA. Oh! There's the problem.
Actions against certain behaviors. Tries to top limits autoplay.
Helps if you plug it into the right holes. Alright, turn that off. Then I can turn that off. Alright, so we're ready for audio. We're ready for video. Can I get the streamer working now? Stream to YouTube. No. Darn it. Well, maybe we'll just have to upload it later. I wish I could. Everything is set up right. It should work. So we stream live on YouTube for people that can't make it to the meetings. And unfortunately, the YouTube streamer doesn't want to work at the moment, even though everything is set up properly. Sometimes it's just really annoying. Well, and they're all set right. I tried that restarting the streaming server. I haven't restarted the computer yet. So we can. Excuse me. So the only thing we're missing now is the live stream to YouTube, but it is recording, so we can upload it later when we need to. All right, so let me hide that window. We'll bring in Adam. And we'll make a video call to Adam. Skype. He said he was having trouble with FaceTime. The FaceTime group options in the new OS. My camera doesn't have a wide enough point of view to get everybody. Frank, move over. Everybody dance. All right, we'll give him a minute. I did say about 7:30. Yeah. Let me make sure I got the right email address. Oh, here he is. He's typing. That's the wrong your. You're ready. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I can point the camera at you. Ah, no. So we're not quite online yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe I'll try, let's start the streamer again. Stream. Nope. Suppose I could try streaming it to the Soundbites channel. Now that would really annoy me if the Soundbites channel worked and the CIDER channel didn't work. Because there's no reason for that. Nope. The fact that it fails so quickly is interesting too. The other option is to try their new broadcaster in stream. All right.
Hello, Steve.
Hi there.
Okay.
Adam, hi. This is Charlie Bergener from Apple Cider. I just want to say a couple quick things to you before you get started.
You can look at the camera.
Well, yeah,
Hi,
then
Charlie.
I can see him because he's down there too.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And it was my understanding that you had another obligation you had to bow out of to do this. So
Actually, I just had to get home quickly. So that was the my meeting theoretically ended at 7. It went a little long, and I was like, I have to leave now.
okay, so you were able to do most of it. That's good.
So I'm doing fine, but just getting my stuff up here.
Yeah. And while you're getting comfortable here, just one more thing before I give up the mic and let you and Steve and the rest of the club take over here. I have a message for your wife.
Oh.
Please tell her that Read Me First is the best $5 I ever spent.
I will do that, and she will be more than pleased to hear that.
I was so
that she liked that. She liked doing that book a lot.
Oh yeah, it was really. I was 59 before I got my first computer, and I was so clueless that I could not even flounder until I read through that a couple times, and now I flounder great. So thank her very much, and thank you.
Alrighty. Oh, now I've got you twice. There we go.
Hey.
I had a big U and a thumbnail U.
I'm good in stereo.
Yeah. Yeah, let me turn it around so you can see the audience, not stare at me the whole
Excellent.
time.
Oh, there's some familiar faces.
Yep.
Hey, folks.
And we see the penguin is still there.
The penguin is definitely here. But I was you guys have a new space there. You said the East School is being renovated?
Right, East High. Yeah, they're renovating the form room where we usually are. Was it asbestos or something like that? Did they find? Yeah. But we kind of like this room a little better. This is actually the staff cafeteria. And little more cozy. Which works.
There is a point at which rooms can be too large.
Yeah.
Where it's sort of you lose the cohesiveness of the group. I was actually just a month or so ago spoke to the Oniana Mac user group, and they had a similar situation where they'd been kicked out of their longtime room and put in the room next door, which was smaller. I'm like, actually, this isn't too bad. This makes it so people are a little bit closer together and a little bit more interactivity.
Yeah, last month we didn't find out about the room until we got here. And so they threw us in the 1,000-seat auditorium, which was just vast.
Like, okay, everybody, come on up front.
Yeah. And people still sat in the back.
Yeah, right. Oh, I'm embarrassed. Well, no, this looks fine. So I think that's going to work out well. So is my audio and video sounding good and looking good?
Yep.
Okay, good. I have part what I was doing when you called. I was actually on the other side of my computer because I have an LED light panel back there to increase the light in my face, and so you just called just as I was behind there setting it up. So.
And so I got everything working except the YouTube streamer, so we're not live on YouTube.
Ah.
But I'm recording it so I can upload it later. It keeps saying failed to connect to server. But no reason why.
Yeah, the NSA is busy right now.
Yeah. Well, I guess for those of you that don't know, Adam Engst is a longtime publisher of Tidbits magazine, the original and best Macintosh electronic newsletter. What are we, 40 years now?
Only about 29.
29.
So
That's
so
right,
the 40-year
Macintosh,
joke
not Apple.
yeah, really. No, but yeah,
Yep.
it's we're going on being the oldest internet publication around, which we are going to get by longevity. Damn it.
Yep.
We may not have been the first, but we're going to hold on longer than anyone else.
I still have a copy of my Internet Starter Kit with the System 7 floppy disk that had the PPP in it.
People can adjust my camera briefly. If
Yep.
you look at the top shelf there, you can see the full collection of books up there, including
Yep.
some old starter kits.
It's always nice to keep the history alive.
Yeah, you can. I mean, if I should be doing this on an iPad or something where I could walk you around. I could give you the tour.
Yeah, maybe next time.
Oh, well.
Well, I guess we picked a good night to go over Skype with the snow. We got a couple inches here. How much did you get?
We got a couple inches here too, and it was unexpected, unpredicted, and in fact, the other thing that took up much of my morning was our house is we're having a roof redone, putting a metal roof on top of the shingle roof, and because shingles you can only put on when it's warm enough, and so they kept pushing us off, and they're like, oh no, we can do it when it's cold, not a problem, and so but the weather's been so bad, they've been doing it for like a week and a half now, and have only gotten like 3 days of work in. And so they came out today. I tried to get them out on Monday, but they had a job that was higher priority. And they came out and they were setting up, and there was a guy on the roof using a blower to clear the snow off the roof. Yeah, this is and I literally remarked to Tanya, I'm so glad they're doing that because the roof, they have a really steep roof, and it's really I'm sure it's really slippery, and it's good that they're safe. And literally 10 seconds later, he falls off the roof.
Oh no.
And so, yeah, I mean, this is like Tanya's calling 911, within 20 seconds, and and he was actually unconscious for a few minutes, but he woke up, and then we're trying to get him to stay still, but he wouldn't, finally, because he kept insisting on getting up and moving on, we at least got him inside, and eventually the ambulance came and everything like that. But yeah, everyone was really kind of weirded out by that. So it was a tough start to the morning.
Yeah. Hope he's okay.
Yeah, well, it was looking like hopefully just like a broken collarbone or dislocated shoulder or something. But yeah, we were all pretty scared for a while there. So yeah, they do not mess with the snow. The snow it will get you if you were not careful. So you guys got a bunch up there too?
Just a couple inches, although closer to Batavia they got almost a foot.
Holy cow! Yeah, well, kicked in early in the year. So yeah, I guess at least it was morning here, but I don't, if it was later in the day, it's a good day to not be driving to Rochester, I must say, for me.
Well, I said at least it waited till November.
Yeah, right. It's when you get hit in October that you're like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
So then again, the amount of rain we got in October, if it had gotten colder, we would have been, had 2 feet deep of snow. So nonstop. Well, so I'm curious, what did you guys talk about last month? Make sure I don't go too much in the same direction.
Mostly just the phones and
Okay.
the rumors of what we hoped would be announced.
Okay.
And some people were surprised at what was announced, and some people were still aggravated. One thing I've noticed, and I read a couple of blogs about it, is it does seem that the prices are higher.
Oh, yeah.
What Apple typically has done is they release the new stuff at the same price as the old one, and the old one goes down. This year they released the new stuff at a higher price and kept one of the old models, at least in the Air line, but not the Mini line. But I'm jumping ahead a bit too.
Yeah. We can talk about that. I'm happy to go in, any direction that people want. I was sort of planning on talking about, sort of top features in the new operating systems, but certainly had happy to talk about the new machines. They're fascinating machines in a lot of ways. All three of the big announcements with the MacBook Air, the Mac Mini, and the iPad Pro. So what would people? I'll throw it out. What would people like to hear about more? Operating systems first, machines first, both. What are we looking for?
Looks like both is the majority consensus.
Both
we can
is
start
the
with the
majority,
OS.
okay.
Yeah, we can start with the OS and then move into the computers that will run on it.
Why don't we start with the operating systems, and I'll try to go pretty fast. I'm not going to try to cover everything that's new, but just a couple of highlights for each of the big operating systems that Apple released. So and we're not going to mess with slides or anything like that. Too confusing for the moment. But the big one, in many ways, it was iOS 12. So we'll talk about Mojave too. That's the other really big one. But iOS 12 is actually an easier decision for most people because it's good features, lots of nice new stuff, nothing really tweaky or weird or anything like that. And the really impressive thing about iOS 12 is that for the first time possibly ever, it runs faster on it makes older devices faster. Had Air, one of the machines that's right on the edge of what it supports, people are saying it's noticeably faster. And that was something that Apple put a lot of work into. One thing you'll notice if you start listening to some of Apple's keynotes and things like that is they're making a big deal about their environmental impact now. And one of the aspects of environmental impact is you should be able to use your devices longer, because if you're constantly cycling through a new device, then you're putting more waste back into the stream. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's also Apple potentially putting a positive spin on something which is true, which is after you've sold an iPhone to everybody, you can't just there's no one left, right? So there's a certain level of their market, their curves are going to be flattening out just because they've saturated the audience. So I think and we're looking at the long term, right? If you've got an iPhone that you've been using for 5 years, and we give you iOS 12 and it runs better, you're more likely to get a new iPhone when that one finally breaks or gives up the ghost in some other way. So improved performance in iOS 12. If you haven't already installed on an older device because you've been worried about how, frankly, what previous versions have done to your older devices, I would say that's not something to be concerned about anymore. One of the big things that I really like in iOS 12 is Do Not Disturb. And for those who, I don't know how much I can show and tell here, but you can see you have this little moon icon here, and when you open up Do Not Disturb and press on the moon icon in Control Center, you get all these options for having it shut off automatically. This is brilliant. This is the way it should have worked to begin with, because I don't know about you, but I'd go to a doctor's appointment or something like that and turn on Do Not Disturb so I wouldn't get called during the appointment or wouldn't have alarm, notifications going off. And then I'd forget to turn it back on. And 5 hours later, I'm thinking, boy, not much is happening today. It's a slow day. And then only then did I realize that I'd been actually shunting everything into Do Not Disturb. And so with iOS 12, when you do that, you bring it up via long press and see the times, it lets you have Do Not Disturb, put it on for 1 hour, an easy choice, use a good choice, until tomorrow morning, or if you put it on the morning, until this evening. And that's basically, don't mess with me until the end of the day or until the next day, until I leave this location. So again, you're in an appointment. Your doctor's appointment might take 45 minutes. It might take an hour. You don't know. So if you put till I leave this location, then when you leave and it detects that your location has changed, poof, everything can start coming through again. So I like that one possibly the best. It wouldn't work necessarily if you're on a corporate campus and you're in a meeting and you're going to walk back to your office. It might not pick up that as a location change. But the other thing that it has, which is kind of cool, is if you turn it on during an event, it will say until the end of this event. So right now, it's telling me that I have the Apple CIDER remote mug meeting. And so if I turn on Do Not Disturb until the end of this event, and you can see that there at the bottom, and I will just tap that, and poof, now no one's going to disturb me until we're done talking. So that's kind of cool. I recommend, if you haven't been playing with Do Not Disturb, you give it a try, because it's really nice to know that you're in a movie, you're at a concert, something like that. Nothing's going to bother you. You don't have to worry about the embarrassing phone call, which the meeting I was in just before this, the guy got the embarrassing phone next to me got the embarrassing phone call right in the middle of the meeting. So, dive in for his phone. Okay. Another thing that's kind of cool about iOS 12 is how many people have ever really thought, man, if only I could get Siri to do something when I say, Siri, well, make me coffee would be nice, but that requires a little bit more effort. But one of the things that iOS 12 lets you is that has these kind of, I don't want to say canned exactly shortcuts, but Siri will now think of things that it can do for you, and it will suggest that, hey, you might want to assign your own phrase to this. So Siri, a lot of times you're kind of like figuring out the right words to tell her. And so, like, for instance, right now I've got my suggested shortcuts, because Siri will suggest these, is send a message to Tanya Engst. Well, that's a good one. I probably can do that one anyway. Oh, look, it's telling me that I can look up the UV index in dark sky, because I was just in California at a conference that I was looking up the UV index, and it says, oh, he was doing that before. Maybe he would like a voice command to do that. And then another one is a call, one of the roofers, the guy who organized the roofer. Yeah, actually, that would be a good one to have. So it goes in, and if you go into, on your iPhone or iPad, if you go into Settings, Siri and Search, you'll see all these suggested shortcuts. There's always 3 of them there, and if you go into all shortcuts, it'll show you a whole bunch more broken out by app. So, there's ones for the clock, and for FaceTime, and for Find My Friends, and even third-party apps like Google News. So, like, I could tell Google News, see my briefing or read the latest headlines, and it would do that. So this is something that all apps can start doing, and so you might start seeing third-party apps that suddenly have access via Siri that never did before.
And that's one thing we've been waiting and asking for, is letting third-party apps talk to Siri.
Precisely. And so this is step. It gets
we
much
lost
more
your first step
complicated,
there. You were stuttering a little.
Oh, am I breaking up a little? Okay. I was going to say that the step 2 in all this is the Shortcuts app. And I'm not going to go into details there, but just know that if you've ever used AppleScript or Automator on the Mac to automate actions, the Shortcuts app in iOS 12 will let you do the same thing for iOS. And so that's where you can string multiple steps together and be able to automate them all with a single command that you either invoke via tap or via Siri. And so very nice to see Apple opening this up, letting other people do it. And I like the fact that they've done it in this sort of controlled way, rather than letting every app kind of specify every possible thing it could do via Siri, via its own. This way, we can set our own language for Siri, which is much, much easier to remember. Okay, next thing, screen time. This is a really big feature in iOS 12, and it's got 2 main functions. So function 1 is for those of us who feel like we spend too much time on our iPhones or our iPads or whatever. And I mean, we've all hit it at one time or another, that the game you're playing, geez, I have to check Facebook again. How many people are checking Facebook in the audience right now? Okay, just checking. Or you just feel like you're using your iPhone too much, and it's addictive. Everyone's finally admitting these things are addictive, because they've got programmers doing the games and the social media apps who have real experience in making things impossible to put down. And so screen time, on the one hand, is aimed at helping you control your time more. On the other hand, it also allows you to control your children's time more. So that's where the parental controls have all ended up. So screen time has really two basic chunks. One is what it calls downtime, where you say basically, you know, I really shouldn't be using the phone between 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. You know, I really should just concentrate on getting my sleep. You know, I shouldn't wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh, I should just check Facebook. And so the downtime is a schedule. You set it, and during that time, the only things that will work are phone calls and apps that you specifically allow. So you could say, well, yes, I don't want to use my phone between 11 and 8 p.m., or 8 a.m., but I do want to like read a book on my iPhone during, you know, when I'm going to bed. That might go after 11, so I don't want to get that shut down. So you can exempt certain apps. And then the other thing you can do, so you can do this downtime, then you can do app limits. And app limits are, well, it's a little bit misnamed because in fact they're category limits. So you could say, I feel like I'm spending too much time on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Oh man, I'm just spending way more time than I should be on these things. You can say, I'm going to set myself a limit, 30 minutes a day for all social media. And after you've used any of the apps in that category for 30 minutes, it will lock you out. Now, we're all grown-ups, so it will not really lock you out. It'll, when you tap one of those locked out apps, same with downtime, whenever you're in your downtime, you try to open an app, it will say, you know, sorry, you've hit your limit. You know, this is what you set. And you can override it for 15 minutes, or you can override it for the end of the day, or you can say, yeah, my guardian angel really does want me to not read Facebook right now, so I'm going to just not do it. So you're never truly locked out, but you can always override it if you have to. But obviously, if you override it at all times, there's no point in having the feature. The other thing that screen time is just really handy for is that it will tell you how much time you spend on your phone, on your iPad, how much time you spend in each app, which is fascinating to me. I mean, I was like, you can check via day and by week. You can see there. So if I check by things, turns out I read a lot of ebooks before I go to bed. And also, Tanya and I were just flying, so I was reading a ton on the plane. And my big app is Libby, which is an ebook reading app. So that's way more than anything else, and it's kind of interesting there. But you get to scroll through this list and say, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? And sometimes you don't want a whole category. Maybe you just want to block a certain app. You know, games in general are fine, but there's this one game I need to really limit myself to 15 minutes a day, or I just go nuts. So you can do a lot of those kinds of things. It also tells you pickups, how many times you pick up your phone, you know, and you'd be surprised. I mean, I could put it this way. You'd be surprised because I'm surprised. I pick up my phone 61 times a day for the last 7 days. That's a lot. I had no idea that I actually kind of look at my phone 61 times a day. And it turns out, on days when I'm really going nuts, that's an average. I'll go over 100 times a day. So screen time won't prevent you from picking up your iPhone, but it will tell you, hey, maybe you shouldn't be checking it quite so often because you're kind of going nuts here. And then the last thing it does is it tells you how many notifications you get and then from what apps. Because if you think about it, the problem with notifications is they interrupt you. They're going like bing, 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 and so you might want to say, gee, wait, from calendar, I should probably shut that down, or Slack or my Facebook or something like that. It's all just notifying me too much. So screen time, very interesting. If you go into settings, screen time, you can play with it, and I strongly encourage you to turn it on and just see what it does. I mean, you don't have to set any limits for yourself, but it's really fascinating. Okay, let's move on quickly. How many people here have Apple Watches? Okay, a couple.
2 or 3.
So,
yep.
Yeah, so watchOS 5 just came out, and like iOS 12, it's a good one. There's really nothing particularly wrong with watchOS 5. There was briefly something wrong with watchOS 5.1, which Apple released recently, and they actually pulled the watchOS 5.1 update for a few days and then re-released it as 5.1.1. It's got a for a walk or a run or something like that, and it notices that you're doing it, it'll tap your wrist and say, "Hey, I notice you're going for a run. Do you want to record this?" And even backdates, from when you started, which is kind of neat. If you don't do that, you don't actually care about the Workouts app doing that, you might want to turn that feature off because it will suck battery life. Because when it's checking in the background to see if it has to backdate your workout, it's using more battery. So there's also in watchOS 5, we've only tested this. There's a walkie-talkie feature. So in theory, I could press my watch and we could be talking to Tanya directly on my watch. And it works just like a walkie-talkie where you have to press to hold, press to talk, and then you let up when you're done. It seems like a good idea. I don't know. Tanya and I are usually in the same room, and I'd be a little kind of embarrassed to interrupt her if she wasn't in the right room and she was with someone else. So we haven't really used it much, but it's kind of a neat idea. Maybe you have a good example, maybe not.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what the difference is with just making a phone call, other than it's cool. I
think the difference is that it's your voice announcing you as opposed to a ring announcing you. That's it. And you can't. And actually, the walkie-talkie, I don't think you can just you can't deny it. Most of the time when my phone rings or my watch rings, almost all the time it's a telemarketer, and almost all the time I press the button to ignore it. So with walkie-talkie, the whole idea is you'd only do this with your closest friends or family, and so people you are not going to be denying. But again, I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. There's still always times when it's really not appropriate to talk to someone. So who knows? Maybe we have to send text messages before we use walkie-talkie to see if it's a good time. The big win, however, I want to talk about a little bit is with the Apple Watch Series 4 and the health features. This is something which, particularly for those of us who are getting on in age, the Apple has done some really interesting stuff. Most notably, it has atrial fibrillation detection. And so if your heart goes into AFib, basically if one of the atria start to not pump properly because the electrical signals are messed up, it can detect that and alert you. And that's kind of cool and kind of important. So we actually published an article on Tidbits. One of our security editor, so kind of interestingly, is also a paramedic. He's had significant paramedic training, and he's done emergency mountain rescue stuff and all that. So he wrote this article about what these health features are really going to be good for. And so being able to do the AFib, he's really, really hot on, because he's like, that's something that people just don't know, and then it can hit them if it goes, because if you have AFib, you're much more likely to have a stroke, for instance. The other feature that's in the Apple Watch Series 4 with watchOS 5 is fall detection. So if you trip and fall off, if you fall off a roof, hopefully it detects that. And basically, this guy would have been a perfect example, except for we had people around, which is that the watch notices you've taken a fall and says, "Hey, it looks like you've taken a hard fall," and if you do not move for a minute, it will call 911 for you. And it has to use your iPhone if it's a Wi-Fi watch, or if it's a cellular watch, it can do it entirely on its own. But that's a huge feature, and especially for people who, parents, grandparents who may be at risk for falling in the shower or things like that, and not being able to being knocked out, not being able to get up if they live alone. That could be a huge, huge feature. As my friend the paramedic pointed out, the only problem is that it is something where people have to be technical enough and sort of aware enough to be able to wear the watch, keep it charged, be able to have a watch and an iPhone, because you still need an iPhone for it. And so it's not a perfect solution for everyone who might be at risk for falls, but it's still pretty hot. And then the third huge feature, which isn't out yet, it's not in watchOS 5.1.1 yet, is electrocardiograms. So you can actually just put your finger on the button of the watch there, and it will actually do an ECG. And this is almost science. This is almost science fiction that it can do this. It's not nearly as good as an ECG that would be done by about ECG. Basically, you don't normally ECGs, they put sensors all over you, and so they can detect the electrical signals as they travel around the body. In this case, they really can't do that because they've got it in, it's touching your arm and touching your finger. But nonetheless, it's still a really useful thing. And part of, Apple made a big deal about how they were the first device to get this FDA approval and whatnot, which isn't even true, which I happen to know because a year and a half ago, my father had heart valve repair surgery in Rochester, in fact. It was just one of those kind of things that happens. His heart valves were starting to have problems, and so they had the surgery, and he had to have an ECG whenever he went to the doctor afterwards. And what he complained about was that, he would have, I was like, well, when I'm sitting here, he said to the doctor, I don't feel fine, and my ECG looks great, but, there's other times when I don't feel fine. And so we got him this thing called a Cardiaband, which I don't know what the company will how well they'll be doing with the Apple Watch Series 4 out, but it was basically an Apple Watch band that went around, and it had a thumb sensor, so you could put your thumb on it and get an ECG. And what he really liked about it was he could take those ECGs, he could send them to his doctor and say, when I was feeling bad, this is what my ECG looked like. And so I just think that's a really big help for anyone who's dealing with heart conditions. That it's not going to tell you anything. You can't interpret these things yourself, but you can record them and show them to a doctor who will be able to interpret them better. So, okay, Mojave. How many people have upgraded to Mojave already? No one. Okay, a cautious group. I approve. This machine that I'm speaking to you on now, High Sierra all the way.
Yeah. We always recommend you wait until at least the first 0.1 patch to let them work the bugs out.
Precisely.
Which is now out. Yep.
Yeah, I do have a laptop running Mojave, so I've been using it and I like it. But yes, what Steve said is absolutely the case. You always want to at least wait till at least 0.1 or possibly 0.2. In this case, we aren't seeing huge problems, but I would still err on the side of caution. 0.1 came out without a ton of changes, which says to me that those might have been the ones that they were they were more focused on getting the features in. Let me see. I'm trying to remember what was in 0.1. It was new emoji and group FaceTime mostly, and some security stuff. So it didn't feel like this is the bug fix release that we've been looking for. So I personally am still waiting for 0.2. That said, Mojave has a bunch of big features. Probably the most obvious one is dark mode. And so Apple has made a big deal about how, you can switch your Mac into dark mode, and everything that was white is now black, and that was black is now white. So text is reversed and all that. This can be a good thing. What Apple sort of made a big deal about how, it lets you focus on your content more. And I was a little distressed by that because what this ignores is visual perception. So human eyes work more on contrast than anything else. And so light text on a dark background has a much lower contrast than black text on a white background. And that's especially true if you're working in a brightly lit room, kind of like this one is, or if you're in the daytime, because then everything around your computer is also light. And so the main time that dark mode for most people would be important, I think, is if you do work in a relatively dim environment, because then the brightness of the Mac is just kind of burning into your eyes. And it's against this huge dark background of everything else in a dark room. So that might be a big reason to do it. Dark mode has historically been, this kind of thing has been popular with programmers who work all night because they're programmers. And so those of us who work during the day, maybe a little less so. That said, there are maybe about 10% of the population, from talking to an ophthalmologist friend of mine, who they're light sensitive. So if you walk into a dark room and someone turns on the light and you're like, turn it off, that's an indication that the light sensitivity might be an issue for you. And so if you find yourself wanting to turn down the brightness on your monitors all the time, give dark mode a try. It may be a real win, because everyone's eyes are different, and you have to figure out what works for you. But I said I'm a little distressed that Apple sort of talked about it as this, like, oh, if you're hip and a graphics person, of course you'll want to focus the content, in this way. And I'm like, have you ever been to an art gallery? The walls are white. It's brightly lit, So, any event.
There's also a theoretical battery savings advantage, because the screen doesn't have to light up so much. Whether it's noticeable or not is the question.
I've looked into that briefly, and from what I can tell, it's not noticeable. So maybe, but I'd be surprised. So I mean, it depends entirely on whether or not the particular panel that you have is actually turning power off in a significant way to those things, to the various pixels. So, well, Apple always claims these amazing numbers for battery life, 12 hours of wireless web for your MacBook Air or something like that. I've never gotten a coast-to-coast flight without running out of battery on any computer ever, no matter how new it is. And I'm very dubious of all battery numbers, so I would take them with a grain of salt regardless. We'll talk more about that. So let's see, other things in Mojave. Who takes screenshots here? Anyone? Yeah.
A lot of people.
Okay, see? Screenshots are a big deal in Mojave. You all know Command-Shift-3 for full screen, Command-Shift-4 for a window. Well, now you've got Command-Shift-5, which brings up a new interface for actually taking screenshots and making screen recordings. Now, these features aren't actually new.
Which I just invoked on top of Skype.
Uh-oh. You're breaking up too.
Oop, I turned off screenshot.
Oh, you're taking a screenshot of me. Okay. You could do a screen recording of me too, and then we could be recording me. Well, never mind. So used to be the screen recording features, most people didn't even know they existed because they were hidden in the QuickTime Player app, which is really weird. Okay, I mean, it's a truly strange interface, but that was where you could make a screen recording. And so Mojave brings those out into the open very nicely. The one big thing it adds, actually, that's very nice, is that it can include the pointer in a screenshot, which is something you could not do easily before. There were ways of doing it, but it was trickier to do before. And so that's nice. And you can also pick your destination. So for instance, by default, screenshots show up on the desktop, but maybe you want to open them in an app each time. Maybe you want to, send them via messages. Maybe you want to, put them in a folder in your pictures folder. All that's possible now. So if you take screenshots, and Mojave is definitely something that's worth looking out for. Another thing you can do in Mojave is with screenshots, and with any graphic image, in fact, is there's the markup tools become available all over the place. You can select a file in the Finder and then use the markup tools. And if you're not sure what I mean by markup tools, anything you can open in preview in older operating systems, and then you bring up previews tools, you can you can select stuff, you can delete things, you can change the color of stuff, you can add text, you can add arrows. It's actually preview is a pretty good little graphics app. People often don't realize that. And the markup tools in Mojave are almost identical to what preview can do. So it's a great little thing. So you can take a screenshot and with one click be editing it right away. And I think that's going to be kind of neat. That actually, for me, taking as many screenshots as I do is probably the main feature to upgrade to Mojave. Because it's something I'm doing absolutely all the time for tidbits. So, okay, real quick, I'm just curious, how many people here have a HomePod? No one?
Anybody HomePod? They're $100 off at B&H Photo this week.
Oh, I have to say, I'm pretty fond of my HomePod, but I'm also aware that it's mostly a music player. I am not treating it. I do not find Siri to be tremendously helpful on the HomePod. Not so much because the HomePod, just because Siri is not tremendously helpful in the things that I'm mostly doing. That said, for iOS 12 for the HomePod adds a couple of neat features, so you can actually make and take phone calls from the HomePod now, it makes a surprisingly good speakerphone It's got really good speakers and microphones built into it. So if you do a lot of long calls with people, or you use the speakerphone on your iPhone a lot, that might be a reason to get a HomePod. Another thing it can do actually is you can set multiple timers. So if you do timers a lot for cooking, you can say, hey, blank. I'm not gonna set off every Siri in my house. Set a timer for cookies for 12 minutes. Set a timer for lasagna for 60 minutes, and the HomePod will keep those. And when it rings, it will tell you which timer it was and things like that. Interestingly, no other Apple device can do multiple timers simultaneously. So the HomePod's a unique feature that way. And then the last thing that you can do on a HomePod, or frankly anything else, which is kind of neat with Siri, is if you've ever you're trying to find your iPhone, you left it somewhere in the house, and you need to make it ping so you can find it. Well, you used to be able to do that with the Apple Watch, but now, or you can bring up the Find My iPhone on some other device. Now you can just say, hey, as Andy Anatko would say, hey Shlomo, ping my iPhone. And it will. So you can find your iPhone in the couch or on the dresser somewhere, or wherever the heck you left it. And that works with anything in Find My iPhone. So you can find an AirPod, you can find your Mac, you can find an iPad, anything that goes there. And the HomePod is just a convenient way to do that. But it even works via an Apple TV. You can pull up your Siri remote and press the Siri button and say, hey Shlomo, find my iPhone, and it will do it. So that's a neat little feature, again, if you are constantly looking for stuff. So, okay, so that's a huge quick spin through the operating systems. Any questions about operating systems that you've been just dying to ask? Yes, Steve will have to relay.
Yeah. Last night, I updated to iOS 12.1.1 on 12.2 on the beta, and last night I had the Apple ID password went bonkers, and Apple said you have to redo your password, which I did. This morning I found out that a lot of other people, when they updated, had problems with iOS updates.
So apparently the iOS 12.1.2 beta is having trouble with your Apple ID password.
Oh.
And lastly, what I want to say is that when I worked for Apple for a number of years for Apple Care Advisor, we had all your books.
So
One thing I did at the end of every successful call, which you're all successful by the way, but at the end of every successful call, I would tell people, by the way, if you want to know more about this product, and I would advise that they went to the Take Control site and download the book to be detailed.
You read my mind.
All the Apple Care advisors were recommending that, even though Apple would slap your wrist if they heard it, but I was never spanked for it. Thank you for all the users worldwide in your book. They're great books now.
And we like the fact that Apple now has their electronic users guides. We don't know for sure. I don't know if you do or not, but Apple hired Chris Breen. Is he writing those books?
He's not specifically doing that.
Because he disappeared. He got hired by Apple and disappeared.
So,
it's like Serenity
in fact,
Caldwell now, too.
It's more people than that. So from Macworld, both Chris Breen and John Seff went over to Apple fairly quickly. Earlier this year, Serenity Caldwell, actually, who had been at Macworld and then iMore, went to Apple. And most recently, Dan Frakes has. He left the Wirecutter and went to Apple. And so Apple has really, frankly, been hoovering up a lot of the talent in the Apple media industry, which on the one hand is good, because yes, I would say that Apple's documentation has improved significantly in the last couple of years. That it used to be, frankly, just kind of poor, and now it's still Apple, so they won't admit that anything is wrong. There won't be really troubleshooting per se, because that would admit that something could be wrong. They won't give you possible use cases, because Apple doesn't do that sort of thing. But that said, when they tell you how something works, it's usually clear and comprehensive, which is very, very nice. The one place where Apple is still tremendously weak, frankly, is discovery. Meaning, if you go to the Apple website, you will not find any of this stuff. That what I recommend strongly is if you're looking for anything written by Apple, you go to Google, you type in Apple support, and then your question or your search phrase. And Google is indexing Apple much better than Apple is indexing Apple. So that's a big hit there. All that said, from what I heard of the question before, Take Control, which we founded and sold to Joe Kissel in 2017, just came out with Glenn Fleischman's Take Control of Your Apple ID book, and I haven't even had a chance to read it yet myself. But I think this is an absolutely brilliant title to do, and Apple IDs are just, when they work fine, no problems. But when you've got 2 of them or 3 of them, and you because you've been around for a long time, and some purchases on one and some purchases on another, and this is your email and that one's your iCloud drive, and that it can just get mind-bogglingly confusing. And we've had lots and lots of questions over the years about Apple ID related problems. So I would encourage anyone who's just having issues with Apple IDs to check out that book. It's a nice little short book. I think it's like $8. It's cheaper than many other Take Control books because it's a little bit shorter. But that's well worth it for that point. And then just finally to loop back on the whole Apple sucking in all the writing talent in the industry. I will say that I'm a little perturbed by it from the standpoint of Apple's also going to be writing more on the Mac App Store. Literally, the Mac App Store and the App Store apps will have content in them, reviews of software and things like that. And that's good. But I'm actually kind of perturbed that Apple's in essence trying to take over all the functions of an independent journalism. If they can do a review of software, that's great, no problem. But I think there is a real role for the media in paying attention to what Apple may not be doing either well or even pleasantly. Apple can be pretty harsh at times, and I do think that it is only fair if their feet are held to the fire when it is appropriate. And if Apple, by hiring all of these journalists and by creating more and more in-house content that they're giving away and thus hurting the market for independent journalism, makes it so we lose more and more of the outside publications, I don't think that's a good thing personally. And I'm not just saying that because that would include me in it. I think that it's just, in general, the more voices, I won't say the more voices, the better, but I think there should be more voices. And when a company controls all of the press surrounding it, that's not entirely a good thing. So.
That was one of the jokes about Windows in the early days, is that the manuals that came with Windows were terrible, so you'd go and buy a book, and most of the books were published by Microsoft Press.
Yes. Yeah, precisely. So, talk for a bit, because man, on October 30th, Apple introduced a bunch of cool stuff. And frankly, we'll go in the order that Apple did, because I thought it was an interesting choice. So first, they talk about the MacBook Air. Now, the MacBook Air hadn't been updated in ages. I forget the exact number of days or years, but it was a couple of years. Here we go, June 2017, and before that, March 2015. And so it was really, and the 2017 release was not a big one. So this is the first major upgrade in years and years. And frankly, they knocked it out of the park. This is a good upgrade. That they added Touch ID, which is the best part of the Touch Bar. So I'm sure there's people out there who love the Touch Bar. So everyone I know who's got a Touch Bar sort of says, yeah, it's there, I use it sometimes. I wish I had an escape key. So the MacBook Air it does not have the Touch Bar, but it does have that little Touch ID sensor, which I think is pretty neat, because it gives you, like in 1Password or system dialogues, you can just touch it rather than typing your password. Nice thing. They also gave it a Retina display, and that was the thing that was really making the MacBook Air seem old. I have a 2012 MacBook Air, in fact, and same screen as all along, and yeah, you can really see the difference. So having the Retina display would be a whole lot nicer. They may have increased the performance a little, Unlike most Apple announcements, Apple didn't say how much they'd increase the performance by, which is usually a hint. Um, and so the thing is they're using newer chips. It's an Intel Core i5 running at 1.6 gigahertz, which is a relatively slow chip. But the fact that it's an 8th generation chip means that it's sort of inherently faster than some of the older ones, even if they're running at a higher clock speed. So from what I've been hearing, performance is probably a little better than the previous model. It's probably noticeably better than like the 2012 MacBook Air that I have. So I've never been able to justify upgrading my 2012 machine because, come on, it's just not that much different when all they do is, bump the processor a little bit. So, but if you wait 3 or 4 generations of those bumping the processors, eventually you get to a machine which is noticeably faster. It's also really nice that you can have up to 16 gig of RAM. So everything just gets more and more RAM hungry. And so, I would generally encourage people to get 16 gig of RAM. That feels like an easy future proofing. So, it's usually $200 to bump up the RAM, not that much money, and that could get you another 6 months or year usage out of it. So the other thing that you get, frankly, because of the Touch ID chip, is you get a T2 chip. So I don't know if you remember when the MacBook Pro came out with a Touch Bar, we're like, okay, let's see if Apple's going to be serious about the Touch Bar. Are they going to put the Touch Bar everywhere? Is it going to show up on desktop Macs, et cetera, et cetera? The answer is no. It hasn't shown up on anything but the 13-inch and 15-inch MacBook Pro. Apple does not appear to be serious about it, and that's frankly a little too bad because that means apps aren't serious about it and developers, because they know large chunks of their audience are using it on a machine where the Touch Bar isn't there, so why should they develop for it? However, the T2 chip, which is underneath the hood and runs the Touch ID, is in every new Mac that has come out in the last, I guess 7 months, 8, well, 9, for last year, actually, the iMac Pro. And this T2 chip gets you things like a secure boot. It encrypts everything on the SSD by default, so you can't have, someone can't take the hard drive out of the SSD out of a computer and be able to access your data. It actually, on the MacBook Air, it gets you Hey Siri. It's always on, so you can actually I said it, and my iPhone goes, "Were you talking to me?" Silly thing. So the Touch ID chip is kind of neat, the T2 chip is kind of neat, and we're going to be seeing that across the line. When we get to the Mac Mini, it's in the Mac Mini as well, so you can expect to see that. Now, the one thing to be careful with a T2 chip is that encryption of the drive. That's really serious. So you can't do things like take the logic board from one machine and swap in the SSD from another. It just doesn't work that way. The T2 chip is real security. And so if anything, I would say that if you're buying a new Mac with a T2 chip, that's the MacBook Pro, the iMac Pro, MacBook Air, Mac Mini now, you must back up. You have to have good backups, because if something goes wrong with that computer, the contents of your drive are probably going to be inaccessible.
And with many computers now, the SSD is soldered to the logic board. Yeah. So if there's any problem anywhere in the computer, you get an empty SSD back.
Yep, absolutely. And to be clear, Drive Savers, for instance, has said they can still get stuff off of those things if it can be made to work, it will. But they need the whole device, and they need to know your password, because they cannot break that hardware encryption. It can't be done. And so, again, backups are more important than ever before, because something. Probably the thing that's actually been the most questionable about the new MacBook Air is it's got one of the new butterfly key keyboards. Some people don't like them, and they've had some reliability issues. So if you're really a keyboard feel aficionado, go try one out in a store. Do not just assume that you'll like it, because some people don't. And if you don't hate your keyboard, you'll hate your life. Um, it also gets a new Force Touch trackpad, so which is mostly just bigger. It's also the virtual clicks, which I always find is it's just freaky that you can actually they can simulate a click without it actually moving the surface. That's kind of cool. And then more controversial in the MacBook Pro line, but something I think you'll want to think about with the Air is it only has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, and so that you're done unless you buy a Thunderbolt 3 dock or something along those lines. So people with the MacBook Pros have complained a lot about needing to carry a lot of dongles. That will be true of MacBook Air users too, but my guess is MacBook Air users are less likely to be the sort of people who would need dongles to connect to mini DisplayPort or VGA or who knows what, Ethernet, those kinds of things.
I had a moment of panic here earlier because I thought I left my bag of dongles at home in the other car.
Yeah, and it's serious. People get dongle anxiety. I mean, and like my son has a 13-inch MacBook Pro, and he's constantly having issues with, like, he can't connect something or something goes wrong and needs another one, and yeah, it's just fussy. So I'm a little disappointed that the dongles are still being such an issue, but it really is true. So here's the real problem. Oh, one last thing: the new MacBook Air is quite a bit smaller and lighter than the old one. So it's really noticeably. I think it's like an inch in one dimension and half an inch in the other, and it's about 1/4 pound lighter. So it's really noticeably smaller. Some people have said you could instead see it as an improved MacBook. Remember the 12-inch MacBook? And that one's still a little lighter and a little smaller. I've never been a fan of the MacBook because I think it's overpriced and underpowered. And it has one USB-C port, so it's not even Thunderbolt 3, and that just irks me. It is such an outlier of a device, and Apple hasn't really revved it, and I don't know, it seems strange.
And it stayed in the product line at a higher price.
Precisely, and that's what's just weird about this whole thing is we've got, okay, let's see if I can do this. We've got the $999 old MacBook Air. They didn't get rid of the old one. So strange. I mean, it's all the old technology, old ports, non-Retina screen, but it's $999. Then this new one is $1199 to start, and that's again a pretty decent price, but it's a little bit more than was expected. We would have thought, as Steve was saying before, in the past they would have introduced the new one at $999 and just disappeared the old one. So the old one sticks. This is $1199. The 12-inch MacBook starts at $1299. Who knows why? I mean, it's just, again, the only reason to buy that machine is if size is your paramount decision point. It's got to be the smallest possible laptop you can get that's from Apple. That's the only reason to buy a MacBook, and I frankly I would try to talk almost anyone out of that. But then, for $100 more, also at $1299, same as the MacBook, you can get the non-Touch Bar 13-inch MacBook Pro. So people don't think about this one that much, but there's this 13-inch MacBook Pro from 2017. It wasn't revved in 2018. That doesn't have a touch bar. It only has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, but it's only $1299. It's a really inexpensive but still pretty powerful computer. It has a Retina display, all that, much faster processor. So for $100 more than the new MacBook Air, you can get this MacBook Pro that's almost the same. And that's just weird also. So, and then after that, then you get into the 13-inch MacBook Pros with Touch Bar, the 15-inch MacBook Pro with Touch Bar, and there's various models of those that get a lot more expensive and a lot more powerful. But I frankly think that the MacBook line is just confusing now. And man, if you're in the market for a MacBook of some sort, MacBook Air Pro, whatever, you've really got to put some thought into all the variables. So a friend of mine actually wants to buy a computer for his daughter, who's a high school senior going into college next year. And I was like, we have to get together. I can't do this via email. There's so many variables, and she's into music. So, like if she's going to be doing actual, like Logic Pro kind of stuff, then she should probably have a MacBook Pro, but it's more expensive and all these questions. So we are, if anything, the laptop lines have gotten more confusing, and that's, I don't know, a little troubling to me. I usually expect better of Apple. So, okay, MacBook Air. So the next one that Apple comes up, they take a deep breath and then they go into the Mac Mini. You thought the MacBook Air hadn't been updated in a long time? The Mac Mini has not been updated in over 4 years.
1,400 days.
Yes, it was nuts, just crazy. And part of the reason it was crazy was the previous upgrade was a one. Apple revved the Mac Mini, and it had been 2 years since the previous one then, and it was, some people even thought the 2014 upgrade went backwards, in terms of the capabilities. So yeah, the Mac Mini has been in a world of hurt for a long time. It's been thoroughly embarrassing, and so it was really interesting to see what Apple did with it. And to get back to what we were talking about earlier, is it got more expensive. And if you've seen the pictures of it, you'll notice it's space gray. And that's the tip-off these days, to indicate that Apple sees this as a pro device. The Mac Mini is for pros, not just to be for people who want an inexpensive Mac. And so they really did a good job, I think, with the specs on the new Mac Mini. It starts with a Core i3, which is a funny little processor, and that gets you that's for the cheapest possible model. Honestly, I think the only reason someone would want the Core i3 is if you're using it for like a home media server. The performance really isn't important to you, because I think that's kind of a weak processor. But when you move up to they've got a 6-core i5 or a 6-core i7. Those are screaming fast. So they are some really, really nice processors in there. And they're 3.0 and 3.2 gigahertz. So they are really, really good. And then similarly with the RAM, 8 gig that's on board, default, configurable 16, 32, or even 64 gig of RAM. People who are putting 64 gig of RAM into a Mac are serious. I will say they're also rich, because 64 gig of RAM from Apple will cost you $1,400. So you could buy 2 plain old Mac Mini, the $799, well, not quite 2, but it starts at $799. But yeah, you can add $1,400 if you buy the RAM from Apple. Luckily, third parties like OWC have RAM you can install. It's not super easy, but it's doable.
Yeah, it's technically not user installable because you have to pull the logic board out.
Yeah, they're not making it easy, but it is doable. Similarly, with the SSDs, there's only SSDs. It starts at 128 gig, which is actually good. I think, frankly, 128 gig isn't enough for anything, but that's not the point. The point is 128 gig is if you just need this thing to boot, because you're going to be hooking it to huge network stack storage or RAID arrays or something like that. If you're doing video, you can't put all your video on the internal drive in this thing anyway, so you've got big external Thunderbolt 3 storage. So that's the reason for the really small 128 gig unit. But you can bump it up to 256, 512, 1 terabyte, or even 2 terabytes of SSD storage. Again, that 2 terabytes of SSD storage will cost you $1,600. So think twice before you want to do that, because it really would probably be a better idea to get an external SSD and connect it via Thunderbolt 3. If you really want that performance. So, and then just as I mentioned it before, but it's got a T2 chip, and there's no Touch ID because it doesn't have a keyboard built in. But it does get you, completely secure boot and encrypted SSDs. So if you're a professional, you can be a little bit more certain that your data is safe. And interestingly, Apple talks about these when you talk about what's a professional. We're talking about like musicians who use Macs on stage to control equipment. They're talking about video professionals who actually have render farms. They'll actually stack the Mac Minis up and then send video processing jobs to a bunch of Mac Minis and sitting there. And so what's really cool about the Mac Mini, and what's ideal about it for these people, is that it doesn't have a keyboard and a mouse and a trackpad and a display. That you can just have the computer, and then you can hook up to them as you need to, or you can control them remotely. And so you can either save money or just save space. That pretty much any other computer you're going to get, it's going to take up a fair amount of space. The other place where Apple did not skimp in any way, which is really nice to see, again, a Pro Mac should not do this, is ports. So it's got a ton of ports. It's got 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. It's got 2 USB-A ports, the good old USB-A ports that your keyboard plugs into. Woo, hallelujah. You don't need to waste a Thunderbolt 3 port and an adapter on your keyboard. It's got audio and HDMI, so you can hook more easily to whatever random screens are around you, again without wasting a Thunderbolt 3 port. And you can even get 10 gigabit Ethernet. So it's 1 gigabit by default, just a mere gigabit Ethernet by default. But if you're putting this thing into a place where you've got a serious 10 gigabit network, you can pay a little bit more and get a 10 gigabit Ethernet built in. So very impressive stuff. And Apple even, they talk about how you can run, you can run a 5K display and a 4K display, or even a 5K display and 2 4K displays off of this thing, depending on your connectivity choices. So people who are using Mac Minis, again, to control digital signage, where you're running huge. The thing is, though, as I said, I was telling you with some of those RAM and SSD prices, it might start at $799, but that's a 4-core i3 with 8 gig of memory and 128 gig of storage. That's a home media server. It's really nothing else, and that's $799. So, the previous Mac Mini, I think, was $699, and the previous before that, there was even a configuration that was $499. So what we're seeing is that Apple may not be selling as many of these things as they used to, but they're keeping the profits and the revenues up by increasing the prices.
And even though they kept the $999 last model Air, they didn't keep the $499 last model Mini. It was a crappy computer, and it was a dual i5.
Yeah,
but
terrible.
Yeah.
No, it was just not. The other thing is, this new Mac Air it's a different shape, but it's the same industrial design. It looks the same. The new Mac Mini, same. It's space gray, but other than that, it's the same size as the old Mac Minis. So we haven't seen Apple change industrial design in a long time. They did it with the garbage can Mac Pro. And the iMacs, changed to the aluminum shape that we've got now. But really, if you look through your Apple lines, the shapes of these things have stayed basically the same for a long time, with only really minor revisions. It's kind of it's neither here nor there. It doesn't need to change, but I just find it a little interesting sometimes when so much is made of Apple's industrial design chops, and then they don't go and change anything, on their Mac side for 5-7 years.
Johnny Ive was too busy with the spaceship.
Yeah, he's a very busy guy, and they only have one designer.
Yeah,
you didn't know that, but there's only one guy. It's just like there's only one programmer from all the iOSs and Mac OSs. It does seem sometimes, though, that how can Apple, you do hear about some of these projects that just get delayed, and you're like, but don't they have more programmers? And the answer is they do, but when they're trying to integrate everything as seriously as Apple does, sometimes there just isn't enough communications bandwidth between the teams to make things happen all at once. And to be fair, they do come up with 4 new operating systems, 5 if you count the HomePod, every year, and have to update them regularly throughout the year. So, just keeping all that in sync is pretty insane. I just remembered, I forgot about tvOS 12. That's because it's almost entirely forgettable. You should if you have an Apple TV, it was probably updated to tvOS 12 already. You probably haven't noticed.
You can tell where the screensavers are coming from.
Precisely. That's the only good feature in tvOS 12 is you're sitting there going, where is that screensaver? That's really pretty. And now you can touch the pad on the Siri remote, not press it, just touch it, and it will give you the name of what you're flying over. So, which is good and bad, because we've had my son and I have had some long conversations of do you think that's Abu Dhabi, or just like trying to figure out from landmarks where something might be. But you can still do that. But if you give up and you want to actually find it out, just tap the touchpad.
And there is
So
somebody that wrote a Mac screensaver app that draws from the same resources, so you can have those screensavers on your Mac
Oh,
if you want.
okay. I hadn't seen that one. I have to admit, I'm still fond of the Electric Sheep screensaver.
Yes.
Draws beautiful, beautiful patterns if you want to have a screensaver on your Mac.
Or flying toasters.
Oh, I miss flying toasters. Yeah, flying toasters for the win. Berkeley Systems. Yep, After Dark. So that was a great app. So, okay, so we've done MacBook Air, we've done Mac Mini, both desperately in need of updates. Great to have them updated. Oh, and before I go any further, I did want to say, just as a note, this has come up recently, 5K displays haven't happened. So we have the 5K Retina iMac, and it's gorgeous. We have the 5K Retina iMac Pro, and it's gorgeous. And Apple dropped their Thunderbolt displays, and then a while later sort of, anointed the LG 5K display as well. If you want a 5K display with your Mac, you can use this LG one. And I don't quite know the details yet, but apparently they've stopped being carried in some of the Apple stores.
They had trouble with Apple's routers.
And so I went looking for, if you wanted to buy a 5K display, you have an Retina iMac, and I've got a Thunderbolt display right next to it here. It's not nearly as nice as the Retina. There basically aren't any. There's a few that you can find, models that have been discontinued, but it is. I think there's something going on with displays, and I think what it is that 4K has just become the standard, and no one's really interested in going beyond that at the panels. And so we're just not seeing higher resolution displays. And so that's just a little fact to keep in mind if you sort of think, oh, instead of buying a 27-inch iMac with a Retina display, I'll get a Mac Mini and a 5K display. Well, you might be able to, but you might not. That LG is the only one that I can find at all anymore.
There are rumors that the next Mac Pro
Yes.
is going to have a high-res Apple display. And in the Mac Mini Little Tiny User's Guide, the setup shows a beautiful-looking, Apple-looking display with very small bezels. That could be the next Apple monitor.
That's absolutely true. That Apple has said in when they're talking, it is not that far off, finally, that they would be introducing a Pro display to go with it. And it was a relatively small comment, but it was made by Apple executives. So we can hope that does indeed come to pass, because, yeah, it's, and this Mac Mini is a perfect example of something you'd want a really nice display with if you were going to have it as your main computer. I found it slightly funny because someone was saying how much he really loved the Mac Mini because, he changed his computers every 5 years, but his displays every 10 years. And I'm like, seriously, you can wait 10 years between displays? Because they get a lot better. I'm not sure I could go 10 years necessarily on the same display, because I'd be wanting one that was, a fit larger in every direction. But
of course, if you do take a Mac Mini up to the RAM and storage, you're more than an iMac 4K or 5K.
A maxed out Mac makes you $199. So that's a lot of green for a Mac Mini.
Over $4,000.
Yeah, so you're definitely into iMac Pro territory at that point. I haven't seen benchmarks yet really comparing the new Mac Minis to the iMac Pro and things like that, but I think it's gonna compete relatively well. We'll see what happens with the new Mac Pro when Apple comes out with that in 2019. I mean, again, it's 2019. It could be in February or March. It could be November. We just don't know what Apple's going to do. So, okay. So again, MacBook Air, Mac Mini, and then the third piece of Apple's announcement was the iPad Pro. So there were two of them: an 11-inch, which takes over the spot from the 10.5-inch, but once again, Apple didn't get rid of the 10.5-inch. So they got the new 11-inch and a new 12.9-inch. And boy, I have to say, as much as the new Macs were welcome upgrades, I don't want to say that the previous iMac Pros were bad, but it just seems like Apple's putting all of their most of their effort into the iPads and the iPhones. These new iPads are just impressive. The part of what probably the biggest thing they did, Face ID. So no more home button, no more Touch ID, and the Face ID just works. So those of you who've had an iPhone 10, you know Face ID doesn't work in landscape mode. You've got to have it in portrait mode, and not on the iPad Pro, because an iPad Pro, of course, you're going to be using in landscape or portrait a lot of the time. So by switching to a true depth camera, which they can fit into the bezel, and it's a thin one, so it's it's closer to the edge of the screen than ever before, but it's not like that you don't get a notch on the top like you do with the iPhone. Face ID just works. Whatever orientation you have it, you don't notice it. It just boom, it's there. And it was actually, I will say, you do notice it if if a friend of yours has one and is trying to show it to you, because they can't unlock it for you easily without like holding it up to their face first and then handing it to you. But that said, I think it was a really very impressive feat of engineering to build Face ID in. And why don't we have it in the MacBook Air? Why don't we have it in the MacBook Pro? Face ID should be everywhere, and I'm a little surprised that we're not seeing it on the Mac side yet. So especially because of that T2 chip, which is one of the requirements for Face ID, because you need the secure enclave. So Face ID and the elimination of more of the bezel is a really good thing. Another really big change with the iPad Pro: no more Lightning. It switches to USB-C. So suddenly it gets a whole lot easier to attach an iPad Pro to other things like an external monitor, third-party charging devices. Just like you're not dealing with converters all the time or special cables or anything like that.
And we already bought all those dongles.
And what's another dongle between friends? So yeah, and you will need one more dongle. Then Apple introduced a new one, the USB-C to 3.5 millimeter headphone jack dongle. Because of course, how else are you going to plug in your headphones? So yeah, so that is the problem. Once again, that you're not going to get a USB-C headphones, so they got a dongle for that. So the other thing that they did, they significantly re-engineered the Smart Keyboard and the Apple Pencil. So these were the accessories that have come with the iPad Pro from the beginning. And the Smart Keyboard, obviously a little bit less major redesign. I have a 10.5-inch iPad Pro here, and the Smart Keyboard is a pretty good screen cover. It goes over the front of the screen here. The new keyboard folio actually wraps around, so it gives you front and back protection, which is nice, and it gives you two angles. The old one only gets you one angle, so that's kind of a good thing. I have to say, as much as I am a little bit of a keyboard snob, and I'm not very fond of the butterfly keyboard in the MacBook Pros, the keyboard in this iPad Pro is shockingly good, and the new one feels exactly the same. So, Apple really did a good job on that Smart Keyboard. And so, if you're looking for a device that you can write on well, the iPad Pro is not a piker of a machine. The Apple Pencil, however, is where the really cool stuff comes. So I do have the Apple Pencil for my 10.5. Apple Pencil sticks around for $99. Still works with the old iPad Pro and the 9.7-inch 6th generation iPad. Still costs $99. So the problem with this pencil is, you'll notice here, I've got it next to a normal pen. I don't know if I have a normal pencil around. Maybe I do. No, I don't seem to. But every pen that I put up against it, you'll notice the Apple Pencil is a lot bigger, and it's actually a little wrong in dimensions. It just feels too tall, and part of that is that it has this little cap, which is easily lost, and a lightning connector on the end of it, and that's how you charge it. You plug it into your iPad. And the other problem with it is it's completely round, so it rolls off desks. So the new Apple Pencil, one, it's shorter. It's about and on the end. It doesn't have a lightning port. Instead, it has one flat section on the top here, and it attaches to the top of the iPad, just like this, magnetically. So it goes chook and grabs on. It's really a really nice design. And when it's grabbed on, it's in charging inductively from the iPad, which is really cool. Even better, that flat section when you're holding it, well, one, it keeps the thing from rolling off your desk. And two, you can double tap it to change modes in certain apps. So Apple's apps, of course, support this, and third-party apps are going to start supporting it. So you can't do a ton. I mean, you can like switch between two tools, but it'll let you, that's still nice to be able to just go tap tap and then be able to switch between tools. And I believe there was an iFixit teardown where they were suggesting that there were actually like more sensors in there and things like that. And they think that there may be some more capabilities that Apple could be introducing in the future rather than just a single double tap. So, but the new Apple Pencil, $129, $30 more. The new smart keyboards, either, let's see, the old ones were, I think, $159, and the new ones are $179 or $199, depending on the sizes. So, again, everything's just getting bumped up in price a little bit, but the engineering is to die for. And the performance of these new iPad Pros is astonishing. They have a whole new chip. It's the A12X Bionic. So it's enhanced from what's in the iPhone 10s and 10s Max. And Apple claims this new chip is actually faster than 92% of laptops currently sold, which is a really funny number. But basically, they're just saying this thing screams. And if you actually are using software like video editing software, audio editing software, or anything AR stuff, or augmented reality stuff, or anything that's just doing a ton of computation, these things are real. And frankly, the early reviews that I've been seeing have been suggesting that, these are really not, you shouldn't really think of these as tablets. You should think of these as computers. They've got that much power in them.
Especially $2,000 when you max it out.
Precisely. Yep, that's what I was getting there. These, once again, not cheap. So the 11-inch starts at $799, and that's for 64 gig of storage. But get this, both of these things can go up to 1 terabyte of storage. And so the 11-inch will with 1 terabyte will take you up to $1,549. And then with the 12.9-inch one, you'll top out at $1,749, or another $150 if you want a cellular model. So not cheap. Oh, I missed one of the big things. So remember how I was talking about Face ID gets rid of the touch button and the bezel? So let's see if you can see this on my Pro here. But so this iPad 10.5, you get these slightly larger black bars top and bottom. One of them for the home button and one of them for the camera. Those go away. So on the 11-inch, this physical size is the same as the 10.5-inch iPad Pro. Physical size the same, but the screen is bigger. It's got a significantly larger screen. That's why 11-inch versus 10.5. However, with the 12.9, they kept the screen size the same and shrunk the physical dimensions. So let's see if I have one here. I must have a piece of paper here somewhere. Here we go. So you can, if I hold up the iPad Pro against a normal piece of paper, this is how a 10.5-inch stacks up to a piece of paper. The new 12.9 is exactly the size of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which is significantly smaller than the old 12.9. And so that makes it, frankly, I found the old 12.9 just to be ungainly. I mean, it was just like too big, right? I mean, a piece of paper, you kind of know what a piece of paper feels like, and a certain tactileness of it, or like a stack of papers. And the 12.9 was bigger than that, and therefore felt awkward. So getting it down to that 8.5 by 11-inch size, I think, is pretty impressive, and will probably make it quite a bit more attractive. Although, as we were saying, man, is it not cheap, So the base model of the iPad of the 12.9 starts at $999. So you are in lap. Okay, all of this stuff should be available now. It was some of the iPad Pros are probably still on back order. I'm not sure, I haven't checked recently, but basically they started shipping on November 7th, but were bumping out to November 21st within a day or so, just because there was enough demand for them. So if you really want one, go to an Apple store, see if they've got it. I don't know if they will, but worth checking. And frankly, with all of this stuff, I'd recommend, well, deal with MacBook Air and the iPad Pros. I'd really recommend you look at it first if you can. You know that they're enough different that it's worth checking out. The iPad Pro, one of the things also I just want to note, I don't know if you can really see this, but the old ones, they're curved, right? And Apple's doing that to make them seem a little without gone back to the kind of rounded rectangle corners of like the iPhone 5S was I think the last iPhone to have that, and frankly, it looks good. You know, it's nice to have it not be quite so rounded, and it gives it a good spot for the pencil to grab onto because it needs a flat edge for the pencil to grab onto. So I think that Apple's done a nice job with the industrial design once again to be able to get that, you know, all this stuff into this incredibly small space. Oh, one thing with the iPad Pro, it's got so much battery in there, you can now charge your iPhone with it. You know that you can, because it's got a USB-C port. You just plug your iPhone's Lightning cable into it, and it can charge your iPhone. Or any other device that you'd want. Obviously, it's limited to how much it can do, but it's still up there. But again, very impressive stuff. I would say, you know, speaking as someone who owns a 10.5-inch iPad Pro, which again remains available for $649. I wouldn't recommend specifically upgrading from a 10.5-inch iPad Pro. That I'm not sure the differences are that major. But if you were thinking about an iPad Pro, or you're upgrading from another, like a normal older iPad, the new ones, if you've got the money, well worth a look. You know, they're just such nice machines at this point. It's very impressive work.
One thing that's still a little confusing and hard at the store is the iPad is $329. The iPad Pro is double that.
Yes.
$620. So you can buy two. You can buy two, right? And since they added the pencil to the regular iPad, that was a big pushing point to the Pro. So now people are asking, what's the difference? I can get two of these or one of those. Well, it's faster. It's got a better camera. It's got
precisely. Yeah. Yes, you can get two of these for one of those. Again, it's actually an interesting. Ton and I were just working on an article we were asked to do about like buying an iPad for children, and I was like, well, this is sort of not really a question, right? Because it comes down to I don't know if you've noticed. Again, when I talk about a confusing system, the iPad Mini 4, which is like 3 years old, hasn't been updated, is still sold. And the iPad Mini 4 is $379.
$399 for 128 gig.
128 gig, and the lowest, if you don't need the storage space, the 32 gig 9.7-inch 6th generation iPad is $329. If you do need the 128 gig, then it's up to $429. It's actually more than the iPad Mini, but nonetheless, you've got this weird, kind of expensive small iPad still around with this old technology, or you've got a really pretty good 6th generation iPad, with Apple Pencil support and all of that, at $329 to start. And a lot of people don't need much storage on an iPad. You know, if you're not going to be putting a lot of photos or videos or whatever on it, you're mostly going to be doing stuff in the cloud if you're doing data at all. It's just not that important. And so, $329 for a fully functional, powerful iPad is nothing to sneeze at. And then, you jump with these iPad Pros, you double the cost or more, and triple, quadruple the cost. And is it that much better? Well, yes, but only if you've really got a reason for it. It's not an easy decision in some ways. I mean, the easy decision is that 9.7-inch at $329. That's an easy decision. Getting into an iPad Pro, you've really got to have a reason for it. I mean, that said, I got the iPad Pro because I started to needing to know about it, needing to be able to understand what people were talking about when they were trying to work on it. And I don't think it is necessarily a good thing to try to say, oh, can it replace a MacBook? Because the answer is purely based on what you do. So if what you do an iPad Pro can do, well, of course it can replace an iPad, but it can serve your needs is a better way to put it. And it can do a very good job of that, particularly with the Smart Keyboard and the Apple Pencil. And then there's things that the iPad can do that the Mac can't. So this whole like competition between them is a little weird. It's more thinking about what you want to do. What I personally have found is that I do so much in so many apps that I can work on the iPad Pro, but I have to work at it. And then I'm like, and that will require that I go and log into this site and download that app and then make sure this is working, and then go share this data over here. And like I can do it, but it's enough more effort, particularly at first, that I tend to say, oh screw it, I'll just go work on the Mac. And so it's interesting to see. But that said, I've been like, I go to conferences, and when you're in sessions where maybe you don't need to pay attention because not your big thing, I have the iPad Pro. Man, can I do a lot on the iPad Pro while sitting in a session? So that's a nice thing. So yeah, so I don't see it as neither or really at this point, but two different machines for different purposes. Okay, brain dump done. Any questions? Let's see, Steve, maybe you can forward the microphone out because I could hear before.
Unless you want to come up and get the mic.
Hi, Adam.
Hey, Eric.
So I had heard something about in Mojave, you can't boot from an external hard drive. You have to, there's like a default.
Part of the T2 security chip, the secure boot. The default settings, it must boot from an internal Apple drive running a signed Apple OS. There is a utility you can go into to change that. So it can be an unsigned OS and it can be an external drive. So far you can change that. It's like the TPM chip on Windows. We ran into that with a service already, trying to get booting our diagnostic disk on a computer with a T2 chip, and it wouldn't until I found that tech note. So it's not just Mojave; it's any computer with a T2 chip.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, no, I hadn't run into that. This is, this T2 chip is good in a lot of ways, but it's going to require some adjustments in how we think about things. So, unfortunately, security almost always comes with trade-offs, as we all know, and some of these like easy booting from external drives is one of them.
Because that's an easy thing the bad guys do, is bring an external drive and then copy your data. So by eliminating that possibility, it is more secure, but it makes it more inconvenient to you when you want to do it.
I just love how like in every spy show that there's the good guys have like a minute and 32 seconds, and they get into there and they type something on the keyboard and they stuff a USB drive in and they copy all the data in just the right amount of time and they grab their drive and they run out. And I'm like, oh man, that never works. There's just no way. I mean, I could get a USB flash drive. Oh, it would need to be reformatted. Oh, you'd have other files on it. Oh.
And then it wouldn't eject because it's in use.
Yeah, and like, damn it! I wasted my one shot at the secure thing, and now I corrupted the drive by pulling it out without ejecting. I always told you should eject first. Yep. So yeah, it just seems to me that it's one of those situations where a little suspension of disbelief. But yeah, security does come with other trade-offs.
It'd be easier to make yourself an admin password or user account really quick, and then sign in at your leisure.
Yeah.
George.
Other questions?
Yeah. You
yes.
It's not so much a problem. I guess it is a problem. The Apple equipment still works from so many years. I have 3 iMacs from 2011, and they work great with El Capitan, no problem. I have all my old iPads. They still work. A lot of them are sitting on the shelf, and I'll give them to people. The iPhone, my wife just bought a new iPhone. We got the Refurb 8 because of price. over the XR, over the 10R, and I took her old 6 because Apple said we'll give you $25 for it. I said, you got to be kidding. I kept it, and I just have it in my coat pocket just as a spare. You know, and that's the problem with Apple. It works so well for so many years that they don't wear out, and you're reaching the point when, do I buy something new or do I use what I have? You know, it's needs versus wants, I guess, is what it comes down to.
It is often needs versus wants, and the one thing I will add to that again is, you know, both Apple's environmental stance and just in general, you know, the term is, you know, the phrase is reduce, reuse, recycle, and that's not those things aren't parallel. That's a hierarchy. You know, reduce consumption, reuse stuff if you can, and that's where we really fall in. And like, yeah, it's nice if we could recycle our old electronics, and Apple would, you know, break them down and use the parts or something, use the materials. But it's better to reuse them. It's better to keep a functional device in use, and if you can find someone who can make good use of it, that's great. And I was talking to it's a company called Diamond Assets, and they specialize in buying old devices from like institutions. So if a school is getting rid of their, you know, their 4th generation iPads because they're replacing them, they need something faster. You know, Diamond Assets will go in and buy the whole thing, and they'll bring them out and they'll clean them up and refurbish them, and then resell them. And what's fascinating about this business model is they say that they can still sell, you know, 4th generation iPads. You know, these are old machines, but, you know, let's face it, if you had a for $20, that's really cool. And, you know, and particularly if and this particular company does not go overseas, but, you know, I know that overseas, that's another one of the big issues is like India. Apple hasn't done very well in India because India is very price conscious. And so if older hardware is doing better in India because they can get the price down, hey, good. Keep this stuff in use as long as possible, and maybe we won't have to be, you know, extracting as much of it. Actually, it just reminds me, one thing that Apple made a big point of with both the MacBook Air and the Mac Mini is their cases are entirely 100% recycled aluminum. And it's basically all aluminum from stuff that, you know, basically other, you know, Apple products have been made with aluminum, and there's always bits that are left over and wasted and everything like that. And so Apple's gathering all those up and melting them down and putting which again.
And they're also trying to cut down on mining ores by recycling all the internal components as well, especially because some of the ores are in conflicted countries.
Yes. Yeah, some of those things are in places you don't really want to mess with.
And Liam got a sister. What was her name? I'm trying to find it here.
Daisy.
Daisy, yeah. So the Liam
and
robot.
I think Daisy actually might have cannibalized Liam.
Yeah.
there was a little bit of going on there. So yeah, okay. Any other questions? Starting to get a little late here for you folks, I know.
How do you turn on dark mode? It's in your system preferences. I'm doing it here in front of your face.
In general.
And then general, and you have an option for light or dark. In fact, when you install Mojave, it asks you if you want to do light or dark during the setup. So here I've switched to dark mode, and now everything is dark with light text, and then light is light with dark text. One of the other neat things is in the screensaver, there's a new option for dynamic desktops. So under desktop and screensaver, there is a screensaver, 2 of them for Mojave, a sand dune, that in the day it's a bright daylight, and as time passes, it becomes a night scene. So when it becomes night where you are, it becomes a night scene behind you. So that's kind of neat. So far, there's only those two options. In fact, if I move you out of the way, we should have. Yeah, my desktop is now dark because it's dark outside. So it's got that.
Dynamic desktop is sort of an interesting feature, actually. I looked into it and talked to a guy named Thorsten Lemke, who writes Graphic Converter. And a dynamic desktop, in fact, all it is, Apple has a new graphic format they introduced in High Sierra, I think it was High Sierra, called HEIC, high efficiency image compression or something like that. And it's a container, so an HEIC file can contain other files. And so a dynamic desktop is just an HEIC file containing 16 other HEIC files and some metadata. And so Thorsten was able to reverse engineer this. We were working together on this, and he actually made it so that you can, using Graphic Converter 10 point or whatever the current version is, you can make your own dynamic desktops, which is pretty neat. And the only thing I will say is that it's not actually that cool, because what happens is these things just change slowly over time. So the idea is you don't really notice it, but you have for a very long time been able to select in the screensaver, the desktop and screensaver preference pane. You've been able to select a folder of images and then say change the image every 5 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. So you can simulate a dynamic desktop and have been able to for years. Without having Mojave or without having to do this fancy trick. But if you are interested in, you take like time-lapse photographies, for instance, or you take, something like for across a whole day, or an image of a plant growing over months, that kind of thing. If you want to turn that into a dynamic desktop, go to the Tidbits website and search on Graphic Converter and Dynamic Desktop, and you'll find the article that I wrote about how to do this.
We've gotten a lot of computers in recently where people say it's slow, and one of the things we find is they have their desktop picture changing every second. So every second your computer has to stop what it's doing and load a new picture. Yes, that will help make it slow.
How do they even do that?
That's the minimum option in the screensaver, dynamic screensaver. You can have it change every second.
Every 5 seconds. Look at that.
Every 5 seconds, yeah.
That's nuts. Okay, don't do that.
It's cool, you put your family photos and they turn around, but it slows everything else down. Especially since most of the time you've got Windows covering your desktop.
Speaking of which, slowing things down, if you upgrade to Mojave, do not be concerned if for the first day or so it's kind of slow.
Same with iOS 12.
Same with iOS 12, and the reason is that for that first day they're rebuilding caches and re-indexing stuff and all sorts of things in the background. And so ideally what you do is like upgrade to Mojave and at the end of the day, and then make sure your Mac is going to stay on all night, and just let it churn through all the housekeeping stuff that it wants to do. That's one thing. And then the other thing I actually want to mention is these are a Mac that can run Mojave that has just a hard disk, not a Fusion drive, not an SSD. I don't recommend you upgrade to Mojave. And the reason is because Mojave will convert that spinning hard disk to APFS, Apple's new file system. And APFS on a spinning hard drive is quite a bit slower than HFS Plus, the old version. So that's something, there's ways around this, but the simple answer is for now is don't do it. We're not sure if Apple is concerned about this, and they plan to be improving the performance, or their opinion is basically that no one should be using hard disks anymore, which is true. No one should be using hard disks anymore. If you've got a hard disk, let me tell you, an SSD will make your life so much better.
Yeah, we find a lot of that is
the
also
best thing ever.
True with file vault compression, and so it's probably the built-in compression in APFS. And people load High Sierra, and I think even Sierra before it, there's a setup that says, do you want to turn on file vault? And it's on by default, and so many people just say continue, 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 and now suddenly their hard drive has to encrypt, and every time you open a file, it decrypts. Every time you save it, it encrypts, and your computer's always opening and closing system files. And there's another reason it's slow.
So the problem with HFS or with the APFS and performance is the way it uses something called copy on write, where basically it's doing a lot more actions when you access the disk, and when you add data to a file, that kind of thing. And that isn't a problem on an SSD because SSDs they're not spinning, so they can just read to any part of the disk anytime they want and write from it. There's no slowdown. But with a spinning disk, it's got to move the read-write head in and out, in and out, in and out to the right spots. And so it's much, much less efficient in HPFS to do that with a hard disk. So again, hard disks at this point, as we have one of my editors has a 27-inch MyMac with a hard disk, which we recommended he not do back in 2015, but he insisted, and now he's really regretting because it's just super slow. And at this point, it's not easy to replace a drive in like an iMac. Probably the best thing to do would be to get an SSD and with a Thunderbolt 3 or USB 3 interface and as an external and boot from that.
Yeah, you have to cut the glue to pull the screen off. I did one this afternoon.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those. Don't try this.
Yeah.
At home,
What's
folks.
worse is getting the glue back on.
Yeah. Oh boy. All right. Well, I should probably
what's the
finish up and
workaround?
get some dinner here.
How do you not do APFS on a spinning drive?
You can't not do it. What my understanding is that you can, after the fact, you can clone the drive, reformat it as HFS, and then restore it.
Oh, so it's the installer that does it?
The installer that does it. So there's no way to prevent it from happening, but you can take extra time after the fact to put it back. And I'm a little leery of that because I'm not sure. I haven't talked to people who have done this multiple times to know if there's other gotchas possibly. But presumably Apple feels that Mojave on a spinning disk is acceptable. That's just not been our experience.
It's the conspiracy theory that to make you want to upgrade your machine.
This will want you to make you upgrade. Where this came up, in fact, was how when you launch an app the very first time, macOS has to check it. And this actually takes even longer in Mojave because Mojave does more checks than any previous operating system. I mean, I didn't talk about this, but there's more security stuff built into Mojave too. And so our friend, my editor, got a copy of Nicest Writer Pro 3.0, which is a great word processor. But it's a really big file because it includes all the LibreOffice file converters. So I think compressed it's 200 meg and uncompressed it's 700 meg. It's apparently 65% of that space is just these stupid converters. But in any event. And my friend said that it took 20 minutes for it to verify on the first launch.
Ouch.
So, yeah, that's pretty painful. And it did do it, and now it's not fat, now it's slow again, but he was just shocked that something could take that long. And it's a very big file, a very big app with a lot of files, et cetera, but still, it was really painful. All right.
Yeah.
Well, if no more questions, then I should go get some dinner. Nice to chat with you all. Sorry I didn't get to come in person with too many things going on these Wednesday nights.
Yep. Well, let's give Adam a big round of applause, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
We'll do the same thing next year.
Yeah, it's worked well. I do like the opportunity to come up and have dinner with you all and talk in person.
Yeah, a lot of people were missing that. So we'll have to, maybe we'll do it in the late spring. Well, see, the problem is September is the phone launch, October is the computer launches, and it's awful busy for you and writing.
Well, it's a busy time for me. The real problem is that unfortunately I have a second Wednesday conflict every month now. Because that's when I have this group that I'm on the board of directors for. So that's a little bit more problematic for me. But in any event, we'll figure it out. You can always do Skype.
Yep.
We'll always have Skype.
Thank you for coming. Virtually.
All right. Good night, folks.
Good
nice
night.
chatting with y'all.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That may have been more internet issues too at our end and his end. Recording is still running, which is good. Yeah, I remember last year he was talking about that. He had some internet backup that started at 8 or 8:30, something like that. So I'm going to turn that back on, and let me go back to my CIDER page. And so we'll take a short break. We've got refreshments in the back. Where'd you say the restrooms were, Charlie?
Down that way, there will be a hall going off to your right there is where the boys' room is. Turn around the corner, and the back of it is where the girls' room is.
All right. So the girls have to walk farther this time. All right. And I can take any dues if anyone wants to renew or not. are programs that you can buy that will try to help you find duplicates. What it does is it looks for the problem is they can't read the photo itself, but it will look for the title, the file name, the date and time, and then show you the two photos and say, are these duplicates, and let you pick.
So then you have to look through each one of them. And pick
Pretty
one.
much, yeah.
Yeah.
We're hoping that eventually, well, there are some of them that do try to look inside the photo itself, but they still pop up to let you make the final decisions. Are these the same? Are these not the same?
You're not sorting them right by date, so I figured if I tried to sort them by date.
Well, it depends on, I don't remember if you can choose whether it was the date imported or the date the picture was taken. If I do sort, yeah, it just says oldest first. So I think it's the date the picture was taken, but if that data is lost,
Some that have been brought in from old computers or,
Yeah.
you know.
so there's something called the EXIF data, which is inside the picture. It has when the picture was taken, what camera it was taken with, the dimensions, the exposures, that type of stuff. If it loses that information, then it just goes by the date of the file. So it could be you took the picture 10 years ago, but you brought it into your computer yesterday, so now it's a new picture. Yeah. There is an option to change adjust the date and time on the picture. So you can adjust it to something different if you know it was taken at a different time.
Particular photo.
Yeah, or a batch of photos.
Okay, all right. Like all the retirement before.
Yeah. So you know they were all taken
Retirement
at
party.
Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things we often say is it's important to make sure the date on your camera is correct. I've got a bunch of pictures that are dated January 1980 because the battery in the camera died, and Shirley wouldn't reset the time every time she took pictures.
I have some of those too.
Yep.
What do I owe you for these?
30.
If I buy a computer through Blackout, can I get it on time, like the same kind of offer that, that Apple has?
Sometimes it depends on what bank they're using. Thank you. And is this in the right area? If they're using Barclay Bank, that was I think the last one they were using. We can't get Barclay, but some of the other banks we can. The other thing we have found is even people with AAA credit, they get a really high interest rate through that program. You're better off going to your own bank and getting a lower interest short term. Yeah. Sometimes even credit cards are
I
lower.
thought the Apple thing has no interest for 18 months.
Yeah, that sometimes some different programs are like that. Sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's longer. Yeah, they're still using Barclay. Let's see. And you get points. Yeah, so you get a longer 18 months if you buy more than $1,000. So if you buy a computer, yeah. If you buy iPads, you get shorter. Yeah. But you can apply to Barclay card on Apple's website, and then they'll send you a card, and then you can use that just as any regular credit card. Because it basically is. You're signing up for their credit card. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I can take that credit card to your shop and
Yep.
pay for Barclay.
Yeah. Sure.
I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
I finally broke down, got myself an iPhone.
iPhone, good.
The things I've had for a while is trying to take pictures on this and then not transferring
Okay.
But once I just updated or, backed it up to the iCloud, then it seems to be doing them now. But the original pictures I took didn't cross over. And I don't get anything from the other stuff onto here.
Yeah. You need to go into the iCloud settings on the computer and the phone and make sure PhotoStream is turned on. Right. Otherwise, you got to plug a USB cable from the phone to the computer, and it will import it as a camera. Thank you. I don't think I can do it now, but yeah. So PhotoStream will automatically send the photos around. There's another option called Photo Library that puts all of your photos on the cloud. Yeah, and most people don't need to do that, and you often have to pay for more storage to do that. But PhotoStream does the last 1,000 photos for free.
Okay, and then the other thing is, I know it likes to pick up on Wi-Fi rather than using several to save you time. But,
And to save on your cell plan, yeah.
right. But what's, like a lot of times at home, the router goes down and I gotta go reset it. But can you override that?
Yeah, somewhere in the settings is turn off Wi-Fi calling. Let me see if I can find it. Wi-Fi calling. Phone, and then Wi-Fi calling. So settings, you go to the settings app, the gray settings app.
Yeah.
Go back
Okay.
one, and then go up to phone.
It's down a ways.
Yep. It's green.
Okay,
Phone, and then Wi-Fi calling.
Wi-Fi call.
It should be. What's calling? Huh. You don't have. I've got Wi-Fi calling, and you don't. Interesting. Because I can turn it on and off. Huh. So why doesn't yours? Is that a 10 or 10S?
This is the S, the newest one.
Yeah, settings, phone, Wi-Fi calling. Let's try do a search. I'm gonna go back to the beginning. We'll go to search for Wi-Fi. All right, let's try hyphen. Where's the hyphen? Wi-Fi calling. Oh, it doesn't have it. Maybe, what carrier do you use?
I got straight talk.
That may be it. They may not support Wi-Fi calling. Yeah, normally it will say Wi-Fi in the cellular area if it supports Wi-Fi calling.
Because, at home, or if I go someplace or a friend's house, which I have their Wi-Fi on, then it will go through that. But if I want to look something up on the cellular, I can't do it unless. But if I'm out and around where it's not logged into a Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm. Well, that cellular data is the other option to get you on the internet when you're not in Wi-Fi.
So that cellular data is here.
Yeah, so cellular data is on, so you should be able to get to the internet when you're not on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, but if I'm at home or it finds my system, Safari won't find the internet until.
Okay. Your Wi-Fi is on, but not working.
Right.
Yeah, you turn Wi-Fi off.
So that would be.
We'll go back one, and then Wi-Fi, and tap the green to turn it off,
And
and then it will only use cellular
oh, okay.
until you can reset your router.
Okay, that's what I like. Yeah, we're trying to get the right question.
Yeah.
Right answer. All right. Other than that, I'm loving the phone.
Good. Yeah. Alrighty, why don't we sit back down and we'll continue on for a few minutes. I think next month we might point the other way because I think those that whiteboard is bigger than this whiteboard. So we can get a bigger screen. That might be something. So one of the things we were going to do now is a holiday shopping panel discussion. We have our holidays coming up. I think Hanukkah started today, is it? No, I'm sorry, in December. But it's early. Hanukkah's early this year. Yeah, it starts on December 2nd. So we wanted to do this today. Now, one of the things to keep in mind on the Apple Cider webpage, we have our shopping discount link, and we've got links to Amazon and Amazon Smile, so that if you purchase something through Amazon, Cider gets a little bit of kickback. That's not quite the right word. We get a commission, and if you use the Amazon Smile link. I think we can use them both. Amazon Smile allows you to donate to a nonprofit. So you can pick us as your nonprofit donation. And so far, as of November 3rd, I haven't generated, because I'm sending to the CIDER account. I buy all my Amazon stuff on my personal account. So far, Amazon has donated $105 million to charities. Through that. It doesn't cost you anything extra. It doesn't come out of your end at all. It comes out of Amazon's profits, which is a nice way to go about it. Another thing on Amazon that's kind of nice is they have their wish lists. So you can create a wish list as you're going through Amazon. In fact, I use it just to build a list of things I know I want to get, but just not now, so I build a wish list. You can also share your wish list with other people. And so I can, see, I've got my son's wish list on here. I don't know, Shirley, if you've seen Matthew's wish list lately. You can see what your friends want. So he's got his wish list broken down into his airsoft stuff, his boat stuff, his car stuff, tool stuff. He's getting into his light bar. He bought an old beater Jeep for the winter and has been working on it now. Apparently someone stole the light bar off of it when it was sitting by the road for sale. Someone came along and unbolted the light bar and stole it. And different tools. So you can build a wish list and then share that wish list with your friends, and it's a nice way to let people know what you're looking for. It's kind of like a wedding gift registry, and so you can build your wish list. And I got my wish list. Oh nope. Why is my wish list empty? I have to go look at my wish list now. I got to pick which one. I got my home wish list and my work wish list. That's hard to say quickly. And we're starting to see early Black Friday deals. A lot of companies are having sales before Black Friday, and then the actual Black Friday sales themselves. And one of the ways to keep that this is working. To keep up to date is there's a website called Thrifter. Thrifter, as Renee calls it. There we are. And one of the things that Thrifter does is they keep track of prices all along. So there's one of the problems is that companies will raise their price before Black Friday, and then their Black Friday sale is what the price has normally been all year long anyway. And so knowing what a good deal is versus just a deal, and they do stuff besides computers. They've been branching out. So you can take a look at their website to see what deals are, and as we were mentioning earlier, a couple of companies are offering $100 off an Apple HomePod. At $250, it's almost reasonable. At $350, we think it's really overpriced, especially for what it does. It's mostly a speaker, and it's the Siri integration, as Adam said, is relatively weak. If you subscribe to Apple Music, that's the best way to use it as an Apple speaker. But we hopefully they're going to add more features to it later. So Thrifter is a nice way to keep track of what good deals are. Oh, there's the monitor Matthew wanted for almost $200 off. All right. And so you can also have them text you. There's a button here somewhere where they'll text you deals for things you're interested in as well. Yep. I haven't done direct comparisons. Let's ask Google. So let's do Thrifter versus camel. Is that the camel's nose under the tent? Oh, let's do, must include Thrifter and camel. Best tool for that was 2 years ago. Looks like nobody has any direct comparison. Well, here's another one, Cheddar, for checking Amazon prices. So I guess the short answer is I don't know how it compares. Keep both the windows open and look at different things. Well, it looks like camel is only Amazon. Yeah, Amazon price tracker. And they're doing hotels now. Full of ads. That's a little annoying, but it's that catch-22. You want a free website, you have to look at the ads. Otherwise, you have to pay for websites. Anybody else have any good shopping websites they like? ThinkGeek. Yep. ThinkGeek.com for the geeks in your life. How many people have noticed all these cookie things popping up incessantly? This is mostly because of the EU's new laws on privacy. If a website is using cookies, they need to tell you about it, and you need to be able to remove your data from their website. So most websites, especially sites that aren't in EU countries, pretty much all websites in the world are accessible anywhere in the world. That's sort of the point. So pretty much every website has now started telling you about their cookies. Although I have heard there's a couple of newspapers, small newspapers, that will not display if you're in an EU country because they don't want to have to support the EU laws. So ThinkGeek, different pop media properties where you get T-shirts and all sorts of stuff. One of the things that they have every year is they have really, really great April Fool's Day gag gifts, where they put a lot of effort into building these April Fool's Day gifts. ThinkGeek April Fools. Let me see what they had. And some of it is so good that Rick and Morty screaming alarm clock, that you wish it was real. I would love Klingon fridge magnet letters. You wish it was real, and then when you go to order it, especially only $14.99, but okay. We have seen in the past several instances where, here, face hugger snorkel mask, where the interest in an April Fool's joke was so popular they actually went and made it. One of them is the iArcade. Let me see if it's still available. They made this arcade box where you slide your iPad into this small box, and it made your iPad into an arcade game controller, and you had little levers, and the whole thing was great. And for iPad, let me see if I can find it. It was such a great, here it is, such a great idea that they went ahead and built it. They had so many people asking about it, and so it now looks like Ion is selling them, the iCade. Kind of expensive, though. But if you want to stand up arcade, sit down in front of arcade box for your old reminiscence. If you fed a lot of quarters into arcade machines, that would be a really cool thing. They also have a they got Ready Player One stuff. That's interesting. So Ready Player One was a movie. How many people saw it? It was a virtual reality movie where there's a scavenger hunt, and it's all 80s pop culture. And you got to watch it 3 or 4 times to catch all the references to all the different 80s video games and different pop culture things. They have a section in here, can I find it, on cubicle warfare. So you can get little trebuchets, and that's probably under home and office. Trebuchets and rubber band guns. They don't have that pulled out anymore. Let me do a search. Oh, unicorn meat. Get a little can of unicorn meat. They had that was one of their April Fool's jokes once, and their slogan was the other white meat. And apparently the National Pork Council sued them for trademark infringement. and one of their responses back was, it's a fake product. It's unicorn meat. It doesn't exist. You can't. So think geek for the geek lover in all of us and the geeks that you know. And a lot of times even the local stores like Best Buy and Walmart, they'll have online deals that are better than the in-store deals. Especially we're seeing televisions, 4K ultra high def televisions, under $500. So we bought a 55-inch TV. Was it 4 or 5 years ago now, Shirley? And I was so excited because it was 55-inch, 120 hertz, a 1080p, and it was only $499, which was a really good deal. Now that TV is $299. And for the here's for $399. Here's a 55-inch 4K smart TV with Roku thrown in. Ridiculously lower prices, and in fact, our TV's starting to wear out, so we kind of need a new TV anyway. So this is the regular price. What's it going to be on it? So, as pretty typical Black Friday sales, they have one at that price, but once they get you in the door, they'll we'll trade you up to the next model up. Who was it last year, Shirley? Oh, it was Wayne, our friend Wayne. Best Buy had this blowout price on this TV, and he was going to buy 4 or 5 of them for all his friends. And so he gets there in line, and they're handing out tickets in line so that they knew how many they had to sell. And it turned out it was only 1 per person. So then he had to call. He called Ewan and I think Orrin and Ann went down, and they got 3 or 4 more people waiting in line. So each person could get 1, and so they could spread it out among all their friends who wanted the TVs anyway. So sometimes you got to watch for that. If the deal is too good, that might be only one per person. But it's interesting to see how inexpensive things are becoming. But on the other side of that, the quality has gone down, so that you end up replacing it more often. The joke, when I was a kid, my parents got a television console the same year they got me, and it lasted 18 years. And it was so fun throwing that TV in the back of the garbage truck, and the garbage man had a big grin on his face as he pulled the lever to squish the TV, and we heard the CRT breach, and it just reverberated through the garbage truck. That was really cool. Yeah, now you can't do that anymore. But we're generally seeing electronic shelf, the life of an electronic device has been drastically reduced. A lot of it because the prices are so low. So that $500 I spent on a TV 5 years ago, I can get a so much better TV for that same money now, that you almost don't mind that it only lasts 5 years, because you can get so much better one now. But something about ordering it online and it just shows up at your door. Yeah. So you get one of those dash buttons, and a 55-inch TV shows up at your door. George?
Or you get those specials, the inkjet printers for $39, and the first time you buy it at a big box.
Yep. Yeah. You get the really cheap printer. So was someone in the club that used to do that. You get a really cheap printer, and then the replacing the ink costs more than the printer did. So you just go get another one.
I used to have guys in Best Buy, they come in and they want an inkjet printer. And 9 times out of 10, they leave with a Brother Laser writer for $99.
Yep.
That lasts for 10 years.
In general, laser printers are more cost-effective than ink printers. You don't have to worry about the ink drying out. If you don't use an inkjet printer enough, the ink dries out, and either ruins the ink or the head, which then kills the whole printer. And if you use it too much, you spend way too much money in ink. Black and white laser printers, start at $100. Color laser printers now are like 150, 175. Right, but laser is toner. So it's much more cost-effective than liquid ink. I want laser printer. A laser. Technically, they're LED, not laser. 182, 169. So color and wireless. The type of the printer you can get now is so much better than it used to be. I remember the first color laser printer was 50 grand, and that was cheap at the time compared to what you would get before in laser printers. Yep, $99 laser printer on sale, yeah. And most people only print black and white most of the time. And if you do want color photos printed, the color lasers aren't bad, but liquid ink printers still are best for color photos, unless you have a dye sub printer, which are beautiful. But again, the problem of having liquid ink printers is the ink drying out, costing more than the printer does to replace it. So more and more people are now using print services. The Wegmans has a print kiosk now. Walgreens. So there's a lot of local places you can take a flash drive, or even plug your phone in. Now, I'd be a little wary about plugging my phone in and letting it suck all my pictures out. So maybe put the pictures you want to print on a flash drive. Apple used to have a print service built into Photos. They discontinued that print service, but now have opened it to third-party companies. So you can get some third-party print services. Mimeo, Motif, what was a couple of them? I think I looked at Fuji, to be able to order prints right out of your computer, and then they show up at the door. Or you copy the pictures you want onto a flash drive and take that to the kiosk. Or places like Shutterfly. Flickr just announced their cutting down on the free photos. Thank you. They only give you 1,000 photos for free now. You have to pay to get more for sustainability, whatever that means. So a lot of people who do want to print photos, you may want a color printer. I really like the Epson PictureMate, which was a dye sub printer, but they stopped making the supplies for it anymore. That was unfortunate. And so you can get some really cheap printers that way too. So we're just about done. Any last questions? Anything anyone want to see? All right. Again, the Saturday Q&A meetings are canceled unless someone else wants to host it, because Bob is going to be out of town. So we have our board meeting is next Saturday. Just for November, yes. The November meeting is canceled. We've got our board meeting. There we are. Wait, did I miss the board? Yeah, there's the board meeting. Next Wednesday is the board meeting. And there's also sound bites if you have questions in between. We're Saturdays from 12 to 2 on Jazz 90.1 FM. And yep. Maybe not tonight, but pretty soon. Yeah, we'll get this video uploaded to YouTube. The recording is working fine. I don't know why. Let's try starting the stream now. Yeah, now the stream started. So just as we're ready to end the meeting, the YouTube stream is running. We will get the video that I recorded uploaded shortly. Yep. So thank you all for coming. We'll see you next month. December. We should be in this room. We have a tentative speaker coming in on preserving your photos. In addition to archival prints on how to preserve them on your computers as well. All right, thanks y'all for coming. And we will shut down the recording and stop.